Good morning from Warramai Country. I'm Claire Murphy. Welcome to the Solo Bureau. Let's start with a big thank you today to everyone who has been voting in the Great Headshot Blue v Green face-off. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, go to the Solo Bureau Instagram. Sarah actually pointed out in the comment section she couldn't find the pictures of my new show photos, which you are currently deciding which one will get a good run as the lead pick in all my upcoming promo. It is on the Solo Bureau Instagram, not my personal one. Although if you do want to see pictures, I don't know, of my dog or my life in Port Stephens, where I live, by all means, head on over to the personal one too. But I have to tell you, you are currently making my husband very, very happy because I was all in on Team Blue when this started, but he's always been firmly on Team Green, and the majority of you are backing him at this point, and he is pretty damn chuffed about that. I'm going to give it till the end of the week until I make the call, but so far Green is smashing it. All right, so what are we talking about today? Well, yesterday there were reports that 2 people in the US had died from measles. They're the first US measles deaths in 2026 and the first for the state of Pennsylvania in 35 years. With the number of infections on the rise here in Australia, I thought it might be a good time for us to take a measles crash course in a virus that we haven't really had to contend with for nearly 60 years. But let's find out what's been happening while you were sleeping first. It's Thursday, August 27. A deadly flash flood has hit the area on the border between Nepal and Tibet, with 95 people currently confirmed dead and many more missing. At least 340 of the missing are foreign nationals, including an Australian tourist. On the Tibetan side of the border, the number of people unaccounted for is still being investigated, but Chinese officials say they fear mass casualties. Nepal's foreign minister told Parliament that an earthquake had caused an avalanche that triggered the flooding. Facebook and Instagram owner Meta has agreed to settle its US lawsuits by paying US $17 billion and adding extra child safety measures to its platforms. 3 US states, California, Kentucky and New Jersey, were to be the first of 29 states who were taking the social media giant to court, accusing Meta of contributing to the youth mental health crisis by deliberately creating features that were addictive. They also argued that Meta violated federal laws by collecting data of children under the age of 13. The trial would have seen Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg take the stand, but the agreement for the company to adopt a series of safety measures, including a hard cap on daily time limits, stopping push notifications during school hours, more robust age verification measures, and age-appropriate content controls around harmful material to prevent bullying and exposure to things such as eating disorders and self-harm. They'll also introduce pauses for children using its platforms. These measures, as well as the multi-billion-dollar payouts, will end the proceedings before they begin. The original Frank-N-Furter, Tim Curry, has passed away aged 80. The star of the 1975 cult classic movie The Rocky Horror Picture Show had been in ill health in recent years, passing away at his LA home after having spent the past 14 years dealing with the impacts of a serious stroke he suffered in 2012. Along with Frank-N-Furter, Curry is known for playing the evil clown Pennywise in Stephen King's It, the Plaza Hotel concierge in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, as well as parts in movies such as Annie, The Hunt for Red October and Scary Movie 2. Curry had spoken publicly about his stroke, saying he was scared at the time, especially as his father had also suffered a stroke when he was just a young boy. He explained how he had to learn to speak again after his face went sideways. He'd been left unable to walk and relied on a team of carers, telling CBS Sunday Morning that he wasn't afraid of dying.
I don't fear death. I try to avoid it.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with state and territory leaders at a national cabinet meeting yesterday with domestic violence on the agenda. Among the measures discussed by the state and territory leaders with the PM was accelerating work on a second national action plan to end violence against women and children, including improving support for victim survivors and their children and countering harm online. A risk assessment framework will also be developed, which will be provided to police, GPs and hospitals so that warning signs of domestic violence can be identified. States and territories will also look at better responses to sexual violence with a focus on the judicial system. Advocates have said the measures don't go far enough in addressing the issue. Warringah MP Zali Segal saying the measures agreed to are piecemeal and will make no immediate material difference to women and children experiencing family, domestic and sexual violence. If you need help and are dealing with a domestic violence situation, please reach out to 1-800-RESPECT, that's 1-800-737-732, or if you're worried that you're the one reacting with violence against the people you love, there's help waiting at the Men's Referral Service on 1300 766 491. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have landed back in the UK, relocating back after leaving 6 years ago due to a relentless British press. It's being reported that Harry and Meghan and their children, Archie and Lilibet, will live at a non-royal residence in the Cotswolds region just outside of London. Prince Harry's relationship with his father is reportedly improving after many years of Harry speaking publicly about his royal life, including interviews with Oprah, a Netflix series and his memoir Spare, while he took on the press in the courts. His relationship with brother Prince William remains strained. It's also being reported that Meghan is returning to acting. Possibly one of the reasons the family has relocated is for Meghan's work. Those are today's top stories. Next, measles is back. So we're learning as much about it as we can to make sure we recognise it if it shows up in our neck of the woods. There's an episode from the first series of The Pit where Dr. Robbie is telling the parents of a young boy about why he's so unwell. If medical procedures are a tough one for you to be around, take care when listening to this.
Georgia was sick, but she got better on her own quickly.
Yeah, many people get better on their own, like Georgia. However, as many as 1 in 20 kids that get measles get pneumonia, like your son.
Are your children vaccinated against measles?
No.
The MMR vaccine is perfectly safe. Measles is not.
We're concerned about inflammation and possible damage to Flynn's brain and spinal cord.
The measles got to his brain?
Well, his head CT was normal, but the only way to find out if he's okay is to perform a lumbar puncture.
A spinal tap?
I've read about kids who've been paralyzed from a spinal tap.
There is zero risk of paralysis.
What about bleeding or infection?
It's a perfectly safe procedure. We do it every day.
We need spinal fluid to see if Flynn has acute disseminated encephalomyelitis.
And if he does?
We treat with high-dose steroids to decrease the risk of blindness, deafness, intellectual disability, even death.
He could die from this?
The death rate from ATEM is high, 1 in 5.
Do the spinal tap.
No! Can't you just give him steroids without the spinal tap?
If there's no ATEM, the steroids could suppress his immune system, making it harder to fight off the pneumonia.
But it says here
Can you put your damn phone away? Your son is critically ill. The longer that we wait, the higher the risk of permanent brain damage. What is not clear here?
Well, there are countries who experience regular outbreaks of measles. There are some who don't usually, like the US, who've now recorded their first deaths from the virus in 2026. 2 residents of Pennsylvania. We don't know much about them. We don't know their gender, their age, but we do know that they were both unvaccinated. Here in Australia, we have pretty low to almost no cases of measles each year, and they almost exclusively begin from someone bringing it in from overseas. So 10 years ago, in 2016, it was 99 cases, 81 in 2017, and in 2019, there was a big jump to 284. Then the COVID years with no or restricted international travel, it dropped to 25 cases in 2020 and then 0 in 2021. It has been steadily increasing since then. 7 cases in 2022, 26 in 23, 57 in 2024, 181 in 2025, and as of this podcast being published, we're at 113 cases and rising. People's distrust of vaccines, which has increased since the COVID pandemic, has seen some viruses that we thought were pretty much extinct here in Australia make a return. Children with their newly developing immune systems are often more susceptible to catching things like measles, especially those too young to have received their vaccination as yet. But it's not all vaccine-hesitant folks who are leaving themselves open to a potential measles infection. Do you know 100% for sure that you have had your 2 doses of the MMR vaccine as a kid? Zoe Croker is an epidemiologist at the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance. Zoe, welcome to the Solo Bureau.
Thank you so much, Claire.
All right, first up, what is measles and how do we get it?
Measles is a virus, one of the most infectious viruses known to be transmitted between humans. And we get it through droplets in the air. They can stay in the air for up to 2 hours and also sometimes on surfaces as well. So we breathe them in and then we can get infected.
So you say it can stay in the air for 2 hours. I've always been under this impression if someone sneezes, it goes in the air and then kind of settles and then we're fine. But if you sneeze measles into the air, it can hang around for 2 hours.
That's right, yes. So if you're in, say, an enclosed space like a doctor's waiting room or somewhere like that, it's sitting around, potentially infecting someone who's vulnerable.
Okay, that's why we've seen when a measles alert goes out, they often will tell you where that person has been and how long they stayed there for, so you can kind of gauge whether you've been in contact any time around that time, right?
That's right. And particularly in regard to travel, that's often one of the things we consider. If you've been on a train with somebody or on an aeroplane in an airport, those are places where not only are there lots of people, but you're in an enclosed space for a long time.
We all but eradicated person-to-person contact here in Australia, or local transmission of measles, more than 10 years ago now due to the vaccine?
Yeah, officially in 2014, the WHO said that we had eliminated measles, but based on the epidemiology, the number of cases, we think that it's probably reasonable to say it's been eliminated since the early 2000s.
Okay, so the main way it starts spreading here in Australia is if someone has been overseas where there are outbreaks and then brings it back into the country.
Absolutely.
Where are there currently major outbreaks? So if people are travelling to these areas, they need to be aware of where outbreaks are currently happening. So where should we be taking extra caution?
Pretty much anywhere at the moment. We're seeing a huge increase in cases globally, and we're seeing other countries that have similar health systems to us that had previously eliminated measles now losing that elimination status. Also for Australians, we have a lot of travellers to Southeast Asia, and Indonesia and Vietnam have had a lot of measles cases, and we're definitely seeing it coming back from there.
Before the vaccine came into play, how seriously did we take measles? Like, I know that people who were born pre sort of 1966, there's this idea that most people might have caught measles at that stage.
That's right, because it's so infectious, because we think that anybody who was around in that time was most likely to get it because it passed from human to human so easily and so rapidly. What we know and why we really care about a vaccine is that we do want to avoid measles infections because it can be so damaging to a person's health.
What damage does it do then, Zoe?
For some people, it just looks like a rash, or you feel unwell and you have, conjunctivitis in your eyes. For other people, it spreads all through your body. It can cause pneumonia or brain swelling, and even in some cases up to 8 to 10 years later, we get a reactivation of the virus, which can cause a fatal illness in your brain.
So that's like, there was an episode that appeared in season 1, which I know you haven't seen, but there's 2 kids come into the emergency room. They've both caught measles. One kid is sort of recovering and seems fine and just had sort of flu-like symptoms and a bit of a rash. And the other kid ends up on life support because he's ended up with brain swelling. So you just never know sort of which way you're going to go with that, right?
That's right. If they're both unvaccinated, you're never really sure. We also need to consider someone's kind of underlying immunity to other infections, or whether there are other comorbidities going on that might also cause your body not to be able to respond and fight it very well.
Can you get it more than once, or is it one of those ones that you get and then it stays?
Lifelong immunity from what we call infection-acquired immunity will last your whole life. Measles vaccination is also considered lifelong, with some indication that there's some waning of vaccine-derived immunity, but vaccination or infection, you will be protected for life.
Are we getting a little bit too okay? And this measles is not alone in this category, with viruses that we've had a vaccine for quite some time. And so it's not really a part of our lives anymore. Things like polio and others that were a very big deal to people, decades before, but now we just haven't seen it. Are we getting a little bit too okay and au fait with some of these viruses, thinking they're not for us?
I think so. I think we're fortunate enough not to have these viruses circulating and causing the disease that our grandparents would have seen. You think of something like diphtheria, which is now circulating in the Northern Territory and some Aboriginal communities in other areas, and that's a vaccine preventable disease as well. Measles is just like that. It should not be difficult to avoid. It's easily preventable with vaccination, and we don't really want it to just start spreading around the country where there will be pockets of people who can't get the vaccine or have decided not to get the vaccine, and then we'll start to see some really serious infections and potentially some deaths.
Why do we see so many cases happening, say, in areas like you mentioned in Southeast Asia? Is it just due to the fact that they haven't got the same access to vaccines like we have?
I'm not sure about their specific access. I know that usually in every country, measles vaccines are available for everybody. I think in Australia specifically, we are known to have a really good vaccine program. It's been around for a long time. We have really good adherence, and vaccine coverage historically has increased over time in Australia, only starting to drop off since the pandemic. So I think our vaccination coverage is much higher in Australia than in other places.
Well, we'll talk about vaccine hesitancy in a second, but first of all, there is definitely a group of humans that can't be vaccinated, right? So medically cannot.
Correct, yes. So the measles containing vaccines have the live attenuated virus. So it means that there's a tiny bit of live virus in there. So, for example, pregnant women or people who are on immunosuppressing medicines, they can't have this virus. So cancer patients, they can't have the vaccine. And then children, infants. So the vaccine is not given to children until they're 12 months old, their first dose, second dose at 18 months. So until they've had their 2 doses, they are also susceptible. So it's little babies we also need to think about.
So this is one of those cases where herd immunity is doing its thing. So if the majority of us are vaccinated, it may help prevent and cover those people who cannot get the vaccine.
That's exactly it. Measles is where the idea of herd immunity really came from, understanding that because there are some people who can't be vaccinated, but because it's so infectious, you need to get such a high proportion of the population vaccinated to protect those other people. And it does actually do that. You're protecting the vulnerable people by protecting yourself. It's a win-win.
Now, I have seen some data that suggests around 1.7 million Australians might be unvaccinated for measles right now. Now, not all of those people are refusing to get a vaccine. Some of those people don't know that they're not vaccinated, right? So, for example, I went to check my immunisation record, and I did that through MyGov, but it told me that any vaccines I received prior to 1996, and I'm old enough to have been vaccinated prior to 1996, there's no electronic record of that. So I don't know how to check whether I've actually received 2 doses or not. So there might be a bunch of us walking around just unaware that we are not vaccinated correctly.
Absolutely. And the study shows that it is a lot of people born kind of from 1977 up until the early 2000s who may not have had their second dose. And to understand that, we used a lot of blood samples that were sitting in labs and were able to test those samples to see if people had immunity to measles. So it's an extrapolated serosurvey analysis, which then tells us that we have these huge proportions, 5 to 12% of people in certain years who haven't had their 2 doses. If you don't have a record of it, for example, I know that I had my first dose, but I have no record of a second dose. I spoke to my mum. She can't find my old vaccination book. So I went to my GP and I said, I can't be sure I've had 2 doses. Can I have another dose? And they said, absolutely. So speak to your GP. Pharmacists are also people you can speak to. They can check the immunisation register, but they can also administer measles vaccines if you don't have evidence of 2 doses.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if maybe you've had your 2 doses to get a third?
That's right. There's no problem with that. It's not going to affect immunity or anything.
Okay. Let's talk about vaccine hesitancy. So I know some really smart people who are now very worried about vaccines post-COVID. And we have to be honest, there were some very real and very impactful side effects for some people who did receive the COVID vaccine. What do we know about the measles vaccine? Because you don't get it by itself, right? It's part of sort of a bundle, the MMR vaccine bundle. What do we know about that vaccine and what potential issues it may cause, just the vaccine itself?
It is common to get a sore arm or a red mark. Sometimes you might get a fever or a headache. If you're worried about that, if anyone's worried about that, they can speak to a medical professional about it. In most cases, you just go about your day and you're protected for the rest of your life. We have been giving the measles containing vaccines since 1968 in Australia, and we have been monitoring the safety of vaccination very, very thoroughly, particularly since 1996 when a big national safety surveillance program was introduced. And we follow up every signal of any vaccine-related event. There have been no signals for measles-containing vaccines in Australia.
I was having a look back through like the last 10 years of measles cases here in Australia, and we have seen a real noticeable increase in 2025 and in 2026. In fact, I think we are currently outpacing the 2025 numbers. But in 2019, there was like a massive spike of measles cases here in Australia. Was that just because measles cases had spiked elsewhere in the world and lots more people were bringing it into Australia? Do we understand why that number was so high? Because then the years after that were incredibly low, and, you know, in the COVID era, it was like zero. So like how do we know what that spike was from?
Sure. So we do experience small outbreaks in Australia from time to time. The 2019 one was mainly isolated to one community in, I think, Western Sydney area. Previously, outbreaks, say back in 1993, they were much larger. So you see an increase, but if you look at historically, the scale of the 2019 outbreak was so small compared to what we saw, particularly in the pre-vaccine era. So COVID, we saw no cases because we had no one coming in from outside Australia, and we didn't have circulating measles because we have that elimination status. So yeah, we're seeing an increase now. It is cyclical. It's so infectious that it can then increase really easily. And if it's not tracked down by our wonderful public health professionals, then it can get out of hand and then spread, without any control.
Okay, just finally, what symptoms am I looking out for that should be the first initial heads up that maybe measles has come for me?
Sore eyes and red eyes are very common. A cough, a sore throat, and the telltale rash, but that doesn't show up for everybody and it looks different on different skin colours. So if you're not sure and you think you've been exposed to someone who has measles, then isolate, maybe speak to your GP and tell them what you're feeling and get them to check you out.
Zoe, thank you so much for taking some time to run us through Measles 101 today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks for spending time with the Solo Bureau today, friends. I'm getting some excellent ideas for episodes from you. One came in from Vic asking if I could do a podcast recommendation episode. Now, we'll let you know that I may semi-start that in a sort of adjacent way. I know I'm being very vague in this week's Saturday special, and then I'll expand on that from there, and I'll keep you posted on that. Maybe I'll invite some other podcasty mates along for that too. We'll see. If you do have an episode suggestion, though, whether that is a news story, a topic, or something you'd like us to review, like we do with book reviews with Callie from the Kindle Club, let me know. We're always happy to explore it. Okay, it is time for us to part, but we can do it all again tomorrow. Have a good one. I'll see you then.